Welcome to SQL for Absolute Beginners course, lesson 7.1. In this lesson, we are going to modify our schema or table that we created. Now, it does happen that after we created the table, there will be a need either to rename the column, change the type of the column, or delete the column, or even completely delete the table, or even schema. Normally, it doesn't happen, but just in case if we have to, what are those commands? So let's take a look at it. Now, for this exercise, what we are going to do is we'll create a new table called phone book 2. So that way we can kind of play around with this, and we'll keep the same structure as it was for phone book. So we can just reuse our query. So let's go to the workbench, and in the workbench, as you can see, we already have our original query that we wrote for creating the phone book table. Now I'll just add 2 in front of it. So now it is create table phone book 2 and ID, name and phone number as it is. Let's execute this, and as you can see at the bottom, you will see this green check mark. That means our table has been created. And if we expand this table, and if I refresh the section, refresh all, you will see the new table is available now, phone book 2. So what can we do with it? So let's go back to the section that we can see different things. Now, before you modify anything, especially in the table, you should always see what is the current status of that table. So for that, there are 2 different commands we can use. One is called simple describe. It is called describe, and then put schema name and table name. Now you can omit the schema name, as we saw in the previous lesson, that if you had used, let's say, use schema, then it will continue without that specific schema name. But when you are describing or showing, I prefer just to be sure that that is the table we are looking at, because it's possible that the same table name may exist in some other schema, and if you think that is the table name, you might be looking at another schema and you might mess up. So just to be careful. Now let's go back to the workbench, and let's try that command to describe. Now, since we know we are already in this, but just in case, so I will describe the table name, which in this case is our schema name is Edison dot phone book 2. So this is our command, and if I select this line and then try to execute, it will just execute this one. So I execute that, and there it is. So it describes, meaning it will show how this table is structured, meaning it has the field is ID, name and phone number, 3 of them. For each field, what the type is, integer, worker, whether null, allowed, and the key and default, these things you can skip for now. So as we can see, we already have these 3 columns. So now let's say for whatever reason we thought that this field name NAME should be changed to look like plural. So we want to make it look like NAMES. So how do we do that? So for that, the command is, and in this the slide I have given all these rename column. There are different commands. Let's go through that quickly. Oh, before we go there, actually, so describe is one option. There is a similar command that can also do the same, which is called show columns from table name. So this is almost similar to select something from. In this case, instead of select, the word is show, and then all the columns, and then you can say from which table name, and you can execute this command, which will provide you the same answer as the describe one. So you can test it out, it will show the same thing. But if you want to really show it, so let's say show columns from, and then the table name, I'll just give phone book 2, because I know there is no other table like that, so it should be safe. Let's execute that, and it basically gives you the same result output. So either command you can use to understand how the table is structured. Now let's say we want to rename the column, as we decided, right? So first we want to apply the rename command. So how do we do that? So the command is alter table. These are keywords, so that's why I have put it as capitals. Alter table, and then actual table name, then we say rename column. This is keyword again, so in capitals, rename column, then actual column name, which is the current column name, and then you again use keyword to, means from what to the new one, which will be new column name. So let's say in our case we want to define this as as let me bring you the alter command for our necessary thing. So let's go to the workbench. Actually, I'm trying to go there, and I already have my command captured. So here is the alter table, and then the actual table name, which is phone book 2, then command rename. And as you can see, these are in blue, so that means these are keywords, and it is identifying that as a keyword. So alter table, actual table name phone book 2, rename column, which we are just saying rename column. Then we have to say which column, which is in our case NAME, and I'm saying rename it to the new name, which is NAMES. So this is our command. Let's select this and execute. And if I execute that, at the bottom you see it executed successfully. It is done. So if we describe the table again, I'll select the same sentence, command again, and I execute it. Now you can see the table name, the column name, sorry, has been renamed to NAMES. So this is how you rename it. Now there are additional command, which is to, let's say now what we did was for renaming, but what if you want to delete the column? So that would be alter table, similar structures. That's why I'm just putting all these together. Alter table, then you have to give to table name. Instead of rename column, all we'll say is drop column. And since there is nothing to rename, it is just requiring one thing, which is drop column name, and that's it. So if we have to do that, how do we do this? Let's say we want to actually, before we go there, I would say let's add a column. So the similar command is there here, as you can see, add column, which is alter table name, add, then the new column. Now anytime when we have to add a new column, whether you are creating it for the first time or afterward, you have to define the same way, right? Which is the column name, then the type of it, the size, whether null or not null, whichever is allowed. So in our case, let's create a column called, let's say, test, T-E-S-T, that's it. So for that, the command will be, let's go back to workbench, and we'll put it this way. We'll say alter table phone book 2. So we have to still say which table we want to alter. Then we say add, which is just the add column. And as you can see here, you can omit the column word here. That is fine. We'll just say add, because it knows there is what else can be added to the table, the column. So of course the records, but that is a different command altogether. We'll see it next. So add test as a column, and I'm defining it as integer, and we'll leave it as null. So let's see what happens if you execute this command, and I execute this, and it says executed successfully. So now again, if we describe, or let's say show columns from this table, let's see what we see. And as you can see, there is a new column appearing, TEST, test, integer type, and null is allowed. So that's what we did. We altered the table, added a new column. So it's pretty simple. But let's say we also want to now, instead of integer, we want to change the data type for that. And for that, our simple command is alter table name. Instead of saying add, I will say modify the column name, and then whatever the new type is. So in our case, let's change our that new column we added. Instead of integer, we make it the varchar type. So let's enter that command, which is alter table phone book 2 modify test, which is the test column, and say varchar 20. That's it. This is just a sample, so it doesn't matter whatever you want to try it out. I will say execute for that selection, and here it is. It says alter table is successfully executed because it's a green check mark. Now how do we know? Well, let's go back to either describe or show columns, execute that, and we should see tests showing up, but now the type has been changed to varchar 20. So you see, it is very easy. The commands are very simple. Alter table name, and then whatever you want to do, rename, add, modify, and lastly, of course, we need to delete that extra column which we added as a test. So for delete column, I should have added it the last, but it doesn't matter. So alter table name. Now instead of saying delete, the word is used as drop column. So let's drop that test column, and what we'll do is we'll go back to the workbench. We'll enter our command as alter table phone book 2. We'll say drop column, and since I said test, T-E-S-T, let's execute that. Now make sure you have to select this sentence before you execute, otherwise it will try to execute everything again and it will give an error, especially it cannot have the same table name in the same schema. So if we execute this again, it will give us an error saying table name already exists, things like that. All right, so let's execute this selection, and as we wait for it, it looks like it is done and this has been executed. So double check it. Let's describe the table again, execute that part, and there it is. That test column that we added is no longer here, means we deleted it. So it's pretty simple. As you can see, the commands are pretty straightforward. You just have to make sure alter table, then table name, and do whatever operation you want to do: rename, drop, add, modify, whichever we need. So it's pretty straightforward, simple modification. Now these commands you don't need to do on a day-to-day basis. In fact, you will hardly do it if you are unless you are actually creating the tables or managing the tables, which there is a particular role given to the DBAs, which is database administrators. So unless you are a DBA, you won't, in a bigger environment, you won't come across these kind of operations on a day-to-day basis, because DBAs are very specific and this is very responsible job to modify anything, because it will affect any reporting, any data that other people are fetching, it can affect it. So that's why you want to be sure what you are trying to do here. These renaming is possible, it's a very simple command, but it can have quite a large implications. Let's say somebody has written a query which uses the column name as NAME and we somehow change it to NAMES. Now those queries will start failing, and without them understanding what happened, we basically broke the whole system. There might be additional complications afterwards, that they might be using certain way that the query has been written. Maybe they have some additional reports. All kinds of things can happen. So just be careful. These are very powerful commands, but at the same time be responsible for using it. Now this is all we went through. These are actual answers, or rather the queries that we executed, so I just wanted to show that. Now lastly, there are two major and powerful things, which is the table itself. Either we can rename the table or we can delete the table. Again, I want to highlight the warning part here, that delete, if you want to delete the table, that can result in complete loss of data. Basically, of course, there are major companies and other places, there are backups available. So in case these kind of accidental things happen, there might be a way to retrieve. I'm not saying that there is no other way, but again, it will take a lot of extra time and effort to bring that table back. So please be careful when you are deleting or even renaming the table, but nevertheless that is possible to do. So let's quickly do that. Since we created our table, that new table, so why don't we do this? We try to rename the table, and the command is very simple: rename table and then table name to new table name. So if we have to do it, let's try to go back to the workbench, and we will try to execute that command, which is right here, and let's do this. So we'll say rename table and then current table name, which is phone book 2, then we set to new table name, which is phone book 3, let's say. Okay, so I execute this command, and if we do that and we try to, let's just for the sake of it, I'll try to describe phone book 2. Let's see what happens. So I say execute, and as you can see at the bottom, last one, it says describe edition phone book 2 error code, table phone book 2 doesn't exist because we renamed it to phone book 3. On this side under schema, if I refresh again, obviously we will see the new table called phone book 3 right here. So obviously we have phone book 3, but as we know, this is just for testing, so ideally we should be deleting this. So for delete, as you can see, the delete either column or table, the word used, keyword is drop instead of delete. So we'll say drop table and then the actual name of the table. Now here I strongly suggest, again going back to this, I strongly suggest you use, when you drop table, again this is very carefully, this should be done very carefully. Do not just go and execute these kind of commands, but just to keep in mind. So whenever you drop table, in fact even rename table anytime, try to add the schema name dot table name, just so that you know what you are doing, and later on if you if you have to find out these, there will be logs or which are the queries that got executed. You can even review that you didn't do anything accidental, that instead of Carnegie you deleted the table from Edison or vice versa or thing like that. So let's try to be following that practice. So in this case I'll say drop table, and as you can see, it is smart enough system that as soon as I said Edison dot, it shows me available tables, and I can select the table, which in our case is phone book 3. You double click, I select it. Let's double check once more, drop table Edison dot phone book 3, because once I'm dropping, we won't be able to get it back as such, not without the real backup system in place. So I select this, execute it, and bingo, right here it says 0 rows affected. Now if we try to, let's just for the sake of it, we'll try to describe phone book 3 and see what happens. And as you can see, it says this table Edison.phonebook 3 doesn't exist because we deleted it. So that is what we went through all of our rename, modify, add, delete either columns or tables. And now that you know all these commands, well, let's go back to our table section, and actually what we are looking for is to have more data available. So these are one-time commands, but most of the day-to-day operations will be done on the data. But as you know, our table, the original phone book table that we created, it doesn't have any data yet. So before we do that, we'll do a quick exercise. We'll create a new table, and I will give you a chance to do that. And of course I'll give you how to do it anyways later. We'll create a new table, and then we will go from that, so that we can go to get more data and then use data and all kind of fun stuff. All right, thank you so much. We'll see you in the next lesson.